Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello, my name is Thrak. I am the co-host of the 3DO Experience, which is a podcast all about the obscure 90s console, the 3DO. I also host a weekly stream on Twitch where I am ranking every game in the Sega Genesis library one game at a time. So you can go check that out at twitch.tv/Thrak94. And my previous VODs are up on my YouTube channel, which is also at Thrak94. Today, I am here to talk about one of my all-time favorite video games, and that game is Shining Force. Now, Shining Force was originally released in 1992 on the Sega Genesis, and it was the second game in the Shining series, but it was the first to be a tactical RPG. I had first discovered this game in the early 2000s because as a kid, I was gifted something that was called the Sega Smash Pack, which was a collection of Sega Genesis games that you could play on your PC at the time, which was pretty cool. There was quite a few games on there. There was Kid Chameleon, Vector Man, Sonic 2, and also Shining Force. And Shining Force was the game that really grabbed me as a kid. From the fantastic intro to the really colorful graphics, the lively music, the really cool, unique character classes, and even the engaging combat. It's what caused me to really fall in love with this game. And it was actually the first RPG I ever really liked, because also on that pack, there was a game called Phantasy Star 2. And I tried playing Phantasy Star 2 as well, but back then I didn't really care for it. I found turn-based RPGs to be a little bit too confusing for my little childhood brain, and it took me a long time to really appreciate turn-based RPGs. However, with Shining Force, I was able to understand it a lot more as a kid. And I think that's because I equated it to more like chess. And I've, liked playing chess off and on throughout my entire life. And so I was able to equate Shining Force with chess because, you're just moving all your different pieces around. And with that, I was able to figure it out pretty much right away at that point, and I was hooked ever since. One of my favorite things about the original Shining Force is all of the unique character classes that they have in the game. I had mentioned that before. We have like your usual warriors, mages, archers, and the like, but what's really cool about this game is that it adds centaurs, which is something that I find interesting that more RPGs don't have, because centaurs are such a really cool class and a classic fantasy character, so I'm surprised more don't have them. And the original Shining Force has a bunch of them, like a bunch of centaurs. And they're all really cool, and they're all really unique. But beyond that, we have wolves, we have samurai, we have ninjas, we have dragons that you find as babies, and then they grow up. There's the famous hamster named Jogurt. And there's even a floating squid that you find in an egg. And then you warm that egg, and then a little floating squid comes out, and his name is Domingo. And he has an amazing offensive mage ability, so he's definitely a must-have character in your party. There's even more beyond that. It's one of those games that I'm just really fascinated by all the characters and the lore that kind of exists in the game. It's not super deep, but I think it just exhibits this kind of classic fantasy novel sort of vibe to it, almost like a Lord of the Rings or even like a Narnia. Like it just sort of has that feeling of like a classic fantasy adventure story. And what's cool is the game even delves more into science fiction later on because, as I said, there are robots in the game, and then you eventually get a weapon called the Chaos Breaker, which is just essentially a glorified lightsaber. You even go into these more sort of futuristic areas and fight all these characters, and it goes a lot of very interesting places. Places that I think a lot of RPGs tend not to go. They either just stick with the fantasy thing, they stick with the science fiction thing, they may do like a weird Persona kind of a thing, but Shining Force finds a way to stick out. In I believe it's the third chapter, there is a notable battle where you have to cross this giant rock bridge. And at the end of the bridge is this giant laser eye. And the laser eye takes quite a few turns to warm up. But once it warms up, it'll just blast everything, enemies or even, yourselves. So you have to sort of position yourself to be able to get beyond the bridge so you can actually fight it, which really leans into the strategy part of, say, a tactical or strategy RPG. The game's not as in-depth as, say, a Fire Emblem, but it's also not as difficult as a Fire Emblem. It makes the game much more approachable for people who are new to the genre. I mean, heck, it was my first approach into the genre, and I think it did a really good job of introducing all of what makes tactical RPGs cool without it being too much. And yeah, it's fantastic. I've beaten this game many times over the years, and thankfully it's a very accessible game. You can get the game on Steam, you can get it on console via the Genesis NSO app, or even the various Genesis compilations that exist. So it is a very readily available game. And while there may be some things about, say, Shining Force 2 that I prefer over Shining Force 1, Shining Force 1 holds such a special place in my heart that it's really hard to take that away from it. You know, it's really the game that made me a fan of RPGs, or actually made me interested in the genre as a whole. And the game still intrigues me very much to this day, which I think says a lot about the quality of the game. There's a lot more to go in depth with about, like, say, the promotion system, like getting more in depth about how the combat works, all the various towns and different characters that you meet, and the secrets and all of that. But I think it would, in a way, not do proper justice to just how really cool the game is. It's a game that, obviously, I would recommend you all play. So hopefully I did a good job of convincing you that the original Shining Force is well worth your time. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and as always, happy gaming.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm one half of Superpod Saga, a topical variety video game podcast fueled entirely by nostalgia and unleaded gasoline. Superpod Saga, we discuss a different video game topic each and every week. We have new episodes every single Monday covering a different video game topic. More than anything, we want to entertain our listeners and make you feel like you're one of the boys, like you're hanging out at a campfire with some of your best zany, caffeine-powered buddies, and just talking about your favorite games and all that stuff. Stop on down to Superpod Saga. It's on every podcatcher there is. If it's not, let me know and we'll get on it. But again, Superpod Saga, stop on by.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.